I'm Scott Allen Miller, and it is the 23rd of December 2025. We're going to be talking about the growth of, or what we're looking at for tourism here in Nicaragua in 2026, coming up in just a week here. And this is our last chance to do something live, probably, before we get into the holiday season, before we get into La Navidad, before it's Christmas here in Nicaragua and really everywhere else as well. So Merry Christmas early, everyone, and we're hopping on and getting things started. I wanted to talk a little bit about tourism because there is this deep held belief that I've heard from a lot of people that because of the social problems, the economic problems, the uncertainty about the future, the whatever that's going on in both the US and Canada, that there is a massive number of people who are flooding out of North America and moving abroad. And without a doubt, there are some people doing this, but there are some very important things that people need to understand about this. And one of those is that people who were really concerned about this, people who were taking this seriously, people who had a threshold of concern where they were willing to do something about it, broadly moved out 2 to 10 years ago. The number of people who are moving out today is not likely to be as high as it seems, because the people who are still there are the people who have been willing to put up with the situation for some time, and you don't have the low-hanging fruit, if you will. Or the people who are moving out have been in motion for some time, and they're not suddenly being triggered by things that are happening now. Sure, we could say, but more is happening now, but no. That's not realistic. Right, people who were in that, because you have to think about the mindset of people who move abroad. First of all, there's only so many people who can move abroad, right? There's lots of people who are trapped for one reason or another, and so they're not moving abroad if they can't. There's only so many people who are moving to any given place. There's only so many people who have the financial resources to do so. There's only so many people who want to do so. And because there is very little surprise in reality, right? We like to act. I'm going to turn this up a little bit just so we can get, my lighting is not great. Oh, that's way better. Well, maybe. We'll see. We like to act like what's going on right now in the US and Canada is a surprise, but that is not reality. Right, there is very little that has come as a surprise. Very little we haven't seen coming for a long time. Very little that wasn't promised, let alone hinted at. Right, the idea that all this is just some sudden unknown thing, and this isn't. No, people voted for this. People planned for this. People asked for this. Not in every aspect, not every person, but those who were adamantly opposed or really concerned, or it doesn't match what they want, or just looking, or that meant to sound like, or just looking for enough of an excuse to pull a trigger on a move they already wanted to do or were on the fence. They long ago said, well, there's my sign, I'm going to move. And so we've seen an uptick for a bit of time of people moving. What we're seeing today is a couple factors. Yes, things have gotten rougher, things have become more clear, and so because of that, we do see some small number of people continuing to move out. We're not expecting it to stop completely, but we are not seeing a huge uptick in people actually moving. In fact, I'm not sure we see an uptick at all. What we do see is a massive uptick in people talking about moving, threatening to moving, questioning moving, looking into moving, yes, but actually doing it, some, for sure, but the rate isn't changing very much. And that's really important to understand, that it's not a little bit more pressure and suddenly people are going over a tipping point. In no way is that what's happening or what we've seen. And one of the reasons that it's not, and this is a major factor, is that the economics that allow that to happen have changed. Those who foresaw or were concerned about economic situations changing got out. They had years of warning, they took heed, and they did the thing they needed to do, if they're able to. Those that have remained have been broadly caught, again, not everyone, by worsening economic conditions, leaving a larger and larger group unable to make the leap, or feeling that they're unable to make the leap, or more concerned about what making a leap may make. And so even though there may be more pressure, more factors causing people to talk about and consider wanting to leave, the ability to do so diminished, it seems, more rapidly than the desire to, or this serious investigation of leaving ramped up. And so what we're left with is what appears to be a slowing down, not a speeding up, of people moving out, even though practically everyone knows someone who has moved out, and basically everyone knows a ton of people who are threatening to, or talking about it, or looking into it, or so forth. So that's an important factor. The other big thing is that there's this assumption that tourism is exploding, whether because of that or some other thing, I don't know. Global tourism does seem to be up, but tourism in the Western Hemisphere appears to be down. Not in any way whatsoever surprising. This is exactly what we would probably guess would happen. Now, I don't know who did guess, so maybe we wouldn't guess, but it's very reasonable once you look at it after the fact. What we see from some of the biggest indicators, right? Costa Rica being the bellwether of tourism in the area. They saw 2024 as the biggest year of tourism in 17 years. Massive explosion in tourism. Of course, post-COVID, right? Everybody was coming back. By 2024, you could say most of the region was back, right? And by 2025, what Costa Rica has seen is a drop in tourism. Not a significant drop, but when they were expecting a growth of between 7 and 17%, and what they actually saw was a drop of more like 1%, again, not tragic, but they were counting on growth, or they were hoping for growth, and instead they saw shrinkage. And that's Costa Rica. That's going to hedge heavily against loss of tourism, because as tourism decreases overall, the pressure in Costa Rica to keep people out decreases, and more people go to Costa Rica, right? So this is a little bit hard to picture, but imagine Costa Rica is a balloon and it's full of tourists. This is a reasonable way to look at Costa Rica, right? And the more people you put in, the tighter it gets, because the outside of the balloon pushes in. There's more pressure pushing in on the people. So when you have nobody, you can just keep pouring people into that balloon of the Costa Rican tourism industry. But as it starts to get full and starts to expand, it gets harder and harder to push more people in. So as it gets busy, the people who are like, I don't want to feel this pressure, they start overflowing and going other places. So when Costa Rica gets full, we're going to see more people in Nicaragua. We're going to see more people in Panama. We're going to see more people in Colombia, right? Because they're spilling over from Costa Rica. But if we were to have a reduction in the number of people going to Costa Rica, we would expect a larger reduction by percentage in the countries around it, Panama, Nicaragua, Colombia, and so forth. We expect those places to suddenly have the people who were overflowing from Costa Rica stop overflowing and go to Costa Rica. So Costa Rica has a natural hedge that as global or regional tourism drops, it attracts more, because it's the tourism capital. It has some power. It's the most impacted by tourism, but it's also got the most ability to handle it, right, as it goes down. Whereas a 1% drop in Costa Rica might represent a 10 or 20% drop in neighboring countries, because they're switching to Costa Rica since it's not saturated, right? Oh, that place on the beach that I could never get because it's always booked, now it's not booked. So instead of going to my second choice location, I'm going to my first finally, right? So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on with Costa Rica. So that tiny drop in Costa Rica could represent a massive drop in back pressure, right? It may be that Costa Rica normally has 500,000 people who want to go to Costa Rica, but feel that it's just too packed to be willing to go at that time. And so it can take a big drop in the number of people trying to go without you noticing a change in the number who actually go. But that can be very telling for the region. Why are we seeing this in Costa Rica and obviously seeing it in neighboring countries? Well, that is because the two main suppliers of tourism to the region, right? The United States to Costa Rica is like 70%, to Nicaragua is like 45%, and Canada represents probably another 10 to 20% going to Costa Rica at least. And so those two are some of the hardest hit economies in the world right now, and so they're feeling the crunch. Both life is getting much more expensive, and their income is getting much lower. Each one a little bit different, but these factors mean that it has fewer tourists capable of going to other countries and spending money. And so, unlike the expat movement, which has this really big pressure to keep it going, right? People are really concerned about their future. They're really concerned about where they're going to raise their family. They're really concerned about safety or economic futures or whatever. And so they are willing to take big leaps and risks against the economy, or they've lost their jobs and they're like, I've got nothing to lose. And so you get some of those people moving out. Unlike those groups, tourism depends completely on excess income, right? You have to have disposable cash to be able to just go on a trip, pay for hotels, and have a good time. And so as disposable income reduces, we see tourism go down at a very different rate than we see expatriate go down. So that's what we're seeing being hit, even in the pretty obvious places. What we see on the ground here in Nicaragua, and of course, we don't have government reports since 2021. They haven't put them out. Costa Rica's numbers are official as of last month. They do a year to date for November. That's where we see that official drop. If that's accurate or not, I don't know, but I assume Costa Rica, being tourism based, they really work hard to get real numbers into the hands of their investors, or else they end up with bad investments that don't work for their country. So they depend pretty heavily on that being accurate, whereas their lumber forecast may not matter very much. Here in Nicaragua, we don't depend on tourism, so we haven't had reports since 2021, probably because there's no value to it. There's no real reason to track it too closely, and none of us working in the tourism industry care too much. But on the ground, what we saw was a very clear rebound after COVID. During COVID, there was, as you can imagine, an unprecedented drop in tourism. There was essentially no tourism from the outside whatsoever. In the years post COVID, we saw a significant rise over 22 and 23. By 24, it felt much like it was leveling off. And in 25, it feels like it went off the cliff again. There are tourists on a regular basis coming into the country, no question. But it feels, and I've talked to a lot of people in hospitality, and they all share the same thing. They all feel that what we're seeing is a huge drop in North American, especially tourism. We're seeing a slight drop in European tourism. We're just seeing expats in general, but the extranjeros, foreigners in general coming in from outside the region, seems to have dropped by maybe 50%. That might be an extreme number. It probably isn't that bad, but the number feels dramatic. It feels, when you go to a bar, when you go to the club, when you drive down the street, what you see is visibly different than what we saw a year or 2 years ago, right? When we used to go to clubs and expect to see a certain percentage of foreigners that are there, backpackers who were there for the weekend, just going out to see a band or whatever, we went from normally seeing some to often seeing zero. We went from places being mostly foreigners to some nights not having any at all. It is really different. And out on the beaches, we went from foreigners being the primary drivers of restaurant and hotel traffic, at least those that were not serving, gallo pinto and very traditional food, to them being completely background noise, and nearly all the tourists being Nicaraguan. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but it is a huge change in what's going on. And why do I bring this up? Why are we talking about this at this point? On a regular basis, I am told by expats, and I think they're getting, misled by information in San Juan del Sur, of course, which is the hardest hit, and everyone is desperate to make potential investors believe that there is tourism happening, that there is this investment potential for the future. People are coming and saying, well, due to the massive flood of Americans and significant number of Canadians coming because of changes in North America, so they're just expatting at such a rate. And because of the huge increase in tourism, there's such an opportunity to invest in, name the thing that would service those groups, right? Housing, hotels, restaurants, whatever, that target the needs or desires of affluent expats. This is exactly the opposite of what we see. And yet, even though everyone I talk to in the industry, everyone I talk to in hospitality, all have exactly the same experience. Oh, we used to have a certain number of foreigners that were part of our makeup of our tourism business, and now we have dramatically less. But people who are coming in from outside the country and are new here, both are not taking the time to observe the lack of those people on the ground, but also unable, obviously, to collect the observation over time to see how it has gone up and gone down again, to understand that we're not looking at growth, we're looking at contraction. And that the trajectory for the near future is not good for that very small niche of investments. And so someone I talked to just recently was kicking around the idea of, based on completely opposite, contrary numbers, right? Believing that growth was astronomical when in fact shrinkage is astronomical. They thought that going after the largest surplus of housing in the market and creating even more surplus was a no-brainer. In no market is creating surplus a great business idea on its own. It just doesn't work, right? We've got too much of this stuff. You know what? Let's make even more. That's never going to really make a difference. So there's these, we always say, right, everybody who's new to the country is absolutely convinced, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that they are the exception and that they don't need to wait the 2 years to buy a property. They don't need to put in the 5 to 10 years to do business analysis. They don't need to look at the trends over time. They don't need to consider what others have done. They all think that they have some unique thing that's going to somehow work when it hasn't worked for others. And that they don't need the same background information that everyone else has been using to try to figure out how to be competitive or where to invest. But this is a really dangerous thing because we hear this over and over and over again. And I can be approached at least once a week with someone who's like, well, I've got this business idea. Do you want to do this thing with me? Or would you advise I do this? Or can I get you to get involved in it? And the answer is no, I'm not going to get involved in any of those things. Not because I don't like you guys, not because I don't want to help, but because if you're bringing it to me in this way, one, like business partners in that way, not a good idea, right? That indicates that you probably don't have a good business acumen right there. That's not how business people that have successful businesses work, right? You don't want partners. That makes everything much harder. So that's not a way that you would approach it. And two, in most cases, like if you, like I have a business partner, we have decades of working together. We have very good reasons why we do it, and it still creates problems, right? But it's a bit different than just looking for a partner for a project. Like I do projects all the time. I'm not looking for business partners, right? Investors, perhaps in very specific circumstances, but it has to be extremely specific. But partners, absolutely not. It's bureaucracy creates debt. And the next is, because anybody who's coming in and doing a business who hasn't been here for a really long time is guaranteed to be flailing. The first thing that you should know about business is that you never invest when you're new. You just don't know the state of things. First of all, you don't know the value of things. You don't know the opportunities, but you also can't know trajectory. It's like if we take a photograph of a car and you want to know if things are picking up or slowing down. You can't tell from a photograph, not really, if something is accelerating or braking. You might be able to see the front nose of the car a little bit lower or a little bit higher, depending on how much pressure is being added, but you can't tell if the springs are just tightened incorrectly and the car is just leaning in that way. You need to see it in different positions. You need to see it over time, or at least a few different snapshots. Understanding the difference between momentary position and trajectory are very important in business. And the trajectory of Nicaragua as a general economy is excellent, but its trajectory as a tourism location for foreigners is terrible, absolutely terrible. And so investing into that means you're going into a market that's already dramatically oversaturated, because we all got in when there was a much larger market, right? Everyone who's surviving, everyone who's here did it when there were twice, 3 times as many people, like literally many poor people. And those that are really successful were mostly here 10 to 20 years ago and got in with a decade of growth and got in when things were unbelievably cheap and have had a really long time to pay off their debts. And they're barely holding on, and in many cases closing. So if those places are seeing it as oversaturated, shrinking, and not a good opportunity, coming in and opening a new business means that you're at massive disadvantage and you're taking away from the existing businesses. You're going to make it harder for everyone, not just yourself, but you're then making other businesses potentially fail. And failure on top of failure doesn't actually help with growth. It may seem like, oh, you know what, if I come in, I do a good job, and I drive a bunch of places out of business, that's going to make it so much better for me. That may feel that way, and there may be isolated circumstances where that cutthroat business thing actually pays off. But in general, all you end up doing is harm to the locality that you're trying to work in, right? You're coming to a small village, you're going to put everyone else out of business. In the end, you're not going to make enough money to justify that, but you're going to do a damage to that economy that may leave people just not moving in as much, people won't visit as much, and everybody loses, not just your competitors. There are exceptions, but in general, having several places go out of business isn't great. And people ask, why do I keep investing in hospitality when I know these things? I understand that these things are happening. Why do I keep doing it? And that's a couple of reasons, right? One, because I'm in for the long haul. Two, I'm not here to make money. Three, exactly the reason I just said. I don't want my community collapsing. That's not good. That puts it into a downward spiral. And so if I'm able to contribute to a backstop to actually stop that from happening, instead of throwing in a business that I'm sure is not going to make it, right? Doing another failed project, looking at what someone else did, going, wow, completely failed, even though they did a great job. I'll magically do a better job. I'll do the same thing again. No. Instead, I come in and can make decisions like, okay, I'm going to buy this place, but keep it empty, but not make it go out of business, right? I'm just not going to develop it, but I'm going to keep it from becoming fallow. Or I'm going to come in and I'm going to put in a different type of business that doesn't have the same demands, right? I'm looking at what's missing in the market over a decade of research and saying, okay, this thing's not going to make very much money, but hopefully it's going to be able to keep the lights on so that we're able to contribute positively to the community rather than becoming a detraction to it by having a failed business and something that closes up its doors and boards up or whatever. And I'm investing for my children's future, not for my short term. I have very different needs. I want the communities that I live in to be successful or at least livable. And I don't want to spend my time walking down the street and passing by lots of boarded up buildings. That's depressing, even if just for me, but it also makes everybody loses when that happens. There's just less draw for people to come out. So the thing I really want to get across is just how reckless it is to one, listen to salespeople who are trying to trick you, right? Which is a big thing. So that's where some of this is coming from. To imagine, to hallucinate. That's, I think, is actually what's happening in many cases. People are just hallucinating that there's this big uptick in tourism, and it didn't occur to anyone that they would have to check that and that it was not the reality. But it's not intuitive that there would be an uptick in tourism at this point. And we're pretty shocked by it, by how little there is. And to then do I'm going to invest against all common sense and business logic and recommendations. It remains that everyone is sure all the recommendations are, well, they're for other people. All the common sense for other people. All the business knowledge for other people. All the checking trends for other people. I don't know why everyone feels this way, but it remains the case. But this, I want people to be able to point to. When someone's like, oh, I heard that tourism is just booming, you could go, I'm pretty confident it's not. Here you go, right? I think that's exactly the opposite. What is the source that people are using to come up with this? Because it's not coming from the government. It's not coming from the hospitality industry. It's not coming from the real estate industry, which remains super depressed, right? Things continue to get cheaper, not more expensive. We're on 8 years. Oh, yes, 8 years of continuous downturn on the market. So, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, I was making videos telling you guys that it was at the bottom and to be really careful. That has not changed. If anything, it has gotten worse, especially down south. And yet, every day I talk to people and they are sure that that somehow turned around and that it just magically happened and that no one's noticed it. And the reasons that people give for it turning around in their minds are, I can't even imagine how people think those things would encourage that. So that is the message I want to get across. KL7RRC is here. Hola, Scott. My flight is 24th, is rescheduled around a month, fighting some bad tenants in the court. Oh, that sucks. So, but Does that mean you're actually flying in tomorrow? Citizenship Quest says, I'm a Salvadoran American looking for my next passport. Thinking about Costa Rica and Spain as the best options. I really don't know much about Costa Rican passports. I've never heard of someone getting one. Could be easy for all I know. It's not one I look into. Spain has some pretty good passport if you're able to get it as a Salvadoran American. I believe Spain is super easy for you. Just be aware the United States is kicking around the idea of eliminating dual passports. So if you put in a bunch of effort to collect passports, you may lose them. Nicaragua just removed or is proposed, and we know they will. It's going to pass sometime in 2026 that citizenship with Spain is being rescinded. So if you already have it, you'll be fine. But those seeking it will be unable to seek it. That doesn't mean Salvador is going to do the same thing, but there is a precedent that Salvador's neighbor, that it partners with a lot of things here in Central America, is heading that direction for sure, and its tight partner, the United States, is considering heading that direction. Probably not, but they're kicking it around, so that El Salvador may consider that as well, certainly in the realm of possibility, so it's something to think about, right? We warn people generally that the collecting passports thing almost always backfires. It's based around this belief that carrying lots of passports gives you a lot of protection. Generally, that is not true. If you're able to get them easy, it can work out. We know a few people who are like, well, but we're going to do these things anyway. We're going to end up with it. But almost always it ends up taking years of your life and tens of thousands of dollars, and time and money are the things that, one, you can't get back, but also those are the things that truly protect you. One of the most important rules is your money is your safety. Passports can be rescinded, passports can be lost, passports can become useless, passports can be used against you. For example, that American passport can require you to be taxed worldwide. Yes, it's got some really decent tax credits. It's not as bad as it sounds, but it's a problem that a lot of people don't have. So there's a reason why a lot of people want to shed their American passports, because it doesn't actually, in many cases, it doesn't act as a positive to add more passports. It can be a negative to add more passports just on their own. So things to consider. Kenneth Couch says, I've been back in America for 2 years, was living in Cebu, Philippines for 11 years, but I came back to America. KL7RC says, I think numbers around 15% drop in tourism in Costa Rica. Definitely didn't see those numbers, but could be. That's not what it depends how you measure it, right? Is it tourism days, tourism spending, number of tourists? The one I saw was the sheer number of people entering the country. So if you're doing by tourism impact, what you'll see is that as the economy gets tighter in the north, you'll see people still taking vacations but taking fewer days, or looking for cheaper accommodations, or not going out for that third, fourth beer on the beach at night, just cutting, you just cut back a little bit. Like, we're gonna not go out for a fancy breakfast. We're gonna do a cheap in the hotel breakfast. We'll only do 2 fancy meals, or maybe just 1, right? Little decision changes like that can mean pretty decent percentage changes in spending. So it may be that they have a 15% drop in number of tourist days, or a 15% drop in spending. That would be pretty expected from a 1% drop in total count of individual humans across the border, which is what they currently measure as the main measurement. 10by says, where is your Santa cap? I wish I had one. I would wear it on the show. That would be cool. Larry says, Larry Pace, for being tourist season, beginning season, there are not many people in San Juan. Maybe it'll pick up. It might. We're not expecting it to. San Juan is the most heavily hit, and overall, the drop has been for an entire year. We've just been seeing it tank and tank and tank and tank and tank. We have no trigger that would make us expect that there's going to be an uptake. So I think what you're seeing is very likely to remain the case. It is going to be a very light tourist season. Kale says number was spending. Yep, that absolutely makes sense. That's what we would expect to see happen as those numbers play out. So definitely going to be rough there. Not doing a long live stream today. We've done half an hour. This was really, I wanted to do today's video. I wanted to talk about this tourism thing, and it's a perfect chance to sit down at my desk and get this done so that I have time to get work done tonight. And with that, we're going to wrap up. Hope this was educational for anyone. If you would like to help support support the channel, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Scott Allen Miller. It comes directly to me. It is like Patreon, makes a huge difference in being able to afford to do this show. As this does take a lot of time, a lot of money for cameras and stuff, and my wife likes it if it could at least break even and pay for itself rather than being a cost center to get this information out there. So we don't sell anything, so we really appreciate all of our sponsors. And you can join the channel. There's a join button somewhere, right? Oh, I don't know where it is. I think it's over here. And more importantly, I hope everyone has a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Feliz Navidad, happy Yuletide to all those who celebrate the Yule. Light those Yule logs, put up that Christmas tree, and let's go celebrate. If you're in the north, get some eggnog, and if you're here in the south, get some rum popa. That is what makes life good. And real quickly, if you haven't watched it, Irving Berlin's White Christmas, Bing Crosby, Rosemary Clooney, Vera Ellen, and Danny Kaye, best Christmas movie ever made. Go watch it. Enjoy your time. Drink an entire bottle of rum popa.